The call came in at exactly 12:06 a.m. Structure fire, Parkside Apartments, Unit 406. Firefighter Dylan Foster adjusted his helmet, his stomach tightening as the truck sped through the empty streets. He had heard the stories. Every year, on July 14th, Unit 406 caught fire. No one ever lived there for long, and no one could explain why it always started in the same place, the bedroom. Again, Captain Ramirez muttered from the front seat, shaking his head. That place is cursed. Dylan glanced at his partner, Jake, who smirked nervously. First time seeing the infamous 406 rookie, you're in for a treat. The building loomed ahead, bathed in the eerie glow of orange flames licking at the top floor window. Thick smoke curled into the night sky, and yet, from the street, the rest of the building stood oddly untouched, as if the fire knew exactly where to stay. When they pulled up, the building manager, Mr. Hopkins, stood outside, wringing his hands. His eyes darted anxiously to the burning apartment. "It's happening again," he whispered hoarsely. "Same damn room." Inside the building, the air was thick with heat and smoke, but Dylan couldn't shake the sense that something was watching him. They moved swiftly up the stairs, boots thudding against concrete, their radios crackling. "Focus," Ramirez barked. "Search and clear." Dylan and Jake entered Unit 406 first, and it was like stepping into a time capsule. The bedroom was a blazing inferno, but everything else, the living room, the kitchen, looked untouched by fire. The furniture sat as if someone had just been there, the faint scent of perfume lingering in the air. Then Dylan saw it. On the wall by the doorway hung a faded lease agreement. His eyes scanned the name. Eleanor Reed. Jake coughed beside him. "Dylan, move!" But Dylan couldn't stop staring at the name. He'd seen it before, on the department's old case files, the name that appeared after every fire. Eleanor Reed. But she had died years ago, and yet her name still showed up, every single year. The fire was eventually contained, but Dylan couldn't let it go. Back at the station, while the others celebrated another job done, he buried himself in records, pulling every report from Parkside Apartments over the last decade. Every year, same day, same time, and always the same name on the lease, Eleanor Reed. According to the records, she had died in the apartment 12 years ago, a fire, just like tonight. The cause was listed as accidental, though something about the file didn't sit right with him. He dug deeper. The photos in the case file showed a burned-out room, but among the charred debris, one thing stood out. A photograph of Eleanor, smiling softly. It was the exact same photo Dylan had seen inside the apartment tonight. The next day, Dylan visited the building's manager. Mr. Hopkins looked like he hadn't slept in years. "Please," the old man said, rubbing his temples. "Let it go. Some things don't need to be fixed." Dylan ignored him. "Who keeps putting her name on the lease?" Hopkins swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the charred apartment door. "It's not me," he whispered. "I stopped trying years ago." That night, Dylan returned to Parkside. He wasn't sure why, but something compelled him to stand outside Unit 406. The fire damage was minimal, as if the apartment itself refused to be consumed. He pressed his palm against the door. It was cold, despite the fire from the night before. And then he heard it. Soft, faint, a whisper. "Please, help me!" Dylan yanked his hand back, his pulse racing. The voice had been inside the apartment. Without thinking, he pushed open the door. Inside, the furniture was untouched. The smell of smoke lingered, but the most chilling thing was the table in the corner. A photo album. Dylan flipped through it with trembling fingers. Pages of Eleanor Reed's life stared back at him. Birthday parties, family vacations, and the last image. Her standing in front of Parkside Apartments smiling. The caption read, "I'll never leave." The following days were a blur. Dylan's obsession grew. Sleep evaded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Eleanor standing in the bedroom, staring at him through the flames, whispering for help. On July 13th, the night before the fire was expected to return, he convinced Jake to stay with him, inside Unit 406. "I just need to see it for myself," Dylan said, pacing nervously. At exactly 12:06 a.m., the air grew suffocating. The temperature rose, the lights flickered. And then, without warning, fire erupted in the bedroom, right where it always started. But this time, Dylan saw her. Through the flames, Eleanor stood there, staring at him, lips moving silently. Her eyes were filled with something beyond terror, pleading. Jake screamed, "We have to go!" But Dylan couldn't move. He stepped closer, whispering, "What do you want?" Eleanor raised a trembling hand and pointed to the floor. Jake yanked him back just before the flames surged, forcing them to evacuate. The next morning, investigators combed through the scene, and Dylan insisted they check the area Eleanor had pointed to. Buried beneath the floorboards, they found an old box, blackened but intact. Inside, they uncovered letters, heartbreaking letters. Evidence of abuse from her ex-husband, pleas for help she had written, but never sent. Eleanor had been trapped long before the fire ever took her. The guilt was crushing. Dylan handed the letters to the authorities, and Parkside Apartments fell silent for the first time in over a decade. July 14th came and went without a fire, but Dylan knew better. Weeks later, he woke in his apartment to the faint smell of smoke. Rushing to his living room, his blood ran cold. Sitting on his table was the same photo of Eleanor. The caption below it had changed. "Thank you, but I'm still here." Dylan never returned to Parkside again. Some fires, he realized, never truly go out.